It's day 117. It's also August 31st, 2019, and we are in Quincy, Washington. You ever wake up in the morning and ask yourself, what am I doing? And more importantly, why? Yeah, me too. Hi, my name's Craig, and this is my story. A story about life out there. For visuals while listening, search Life Out There on your favorite social media platform or use the links in the podcast description. Well, this has been a pretty amazing few days, in so many ways. After an evening of reading about everything from otherworldly creatures in the Uinta Basin, you know, those ones offering the mortal man a peek into another universe, to how man has learned to master the science of damming a river in high desert regions in an effort to bring life to the people that want to call that place home. We pulled out of our spot along Strawberry Lake in Utah that next morning, and as is usually the case, we didn't get very far before we found ourselves pulling off alongside Highway 40 to admire the Daniel Summit Lodge. It's a beautiful place, tucked into the Uinta-Wasatch Cache National Forest. A quick read will tell you that this place offers year-round adventure. The area boasts over 200 miles of groomed trails, with side-by-side and snowmobile rentals available at the lodge. I imagined how fun it would be to book a room in the lodge for a few days and explore yet another part of the country, a very different kind of wilderness than the one we had discovered just a few episodes back in Rangeley. After snapping a few pics, I'd hop back in the rig with the boys and we'd drop down off that pass, into and through a place called Heber, Utah. As we passed through, I was of course wondering and thinking about why those 17,000 or so folks had decided to call Heber, Utah home. I also imagined we'll probably be back to find out. But for now, we kept rolling. Heber would pass through the rearview mirror, and the windshield would open back up into the vastness of these mountains. It can be hypnotic, just taking it all in. Before we knew it, there were signs tempting us to pull off the highway and check out places like Park City and Perry, Utah. But still, we kept going. Oh, and quick side note, I had no idea that Park City, Utah is home to the largest ski resort in the United States. Over 7,000 acres of groomed and lift-accessible runs. Over 3 million people each year come here to strap on their skis or snowboard, or even hop on an inner tube to hit the mountains of Utah. And not to get off track entirely, but since I'd likely never have guessed that the largest ski resort in the United States was in Utah, I wondered, where does all the skiing happen by volume of visitors in the country? And I guess the answer, Colorado, wasn't a surprise. When places like Breckenridge, Vail, Steamboat Springs, and Aspen call Colorado home, and they equal some 27 million skiers each year. Putting all this behind us, before we knew it, we'd crossed over into Idaho, and we're driving through for the second time this summer a place called Pocatello. But we kept going this time, passing through Dubois, Idaho, and then yet again another state line would be in the rear view. This time, it was Montana in front of us. There is so much here that needs to be seen and done in Montana, but no time for all that this trip. When I come back to Montana, and I will very soon, it'll be when I have time to look into what needs to be learned around here, specifically a place called Craig, Montana. For now, it had been a long day, and by the end of it, we'd put nearly 400 miles in 2 states behind us. We had trekked our way through those Uinta Mountains of Utah, up through a sliver of Idaho just skirting Wyoming, reading all the signs. Silver Summit, Strawberry Mountains, Salt Lake, Ogden, on and on. Then the sun starts to drop nearer that horizon, I saw the reflection of my face in the dash, but there was so much openness in front of me, and so little daylight left. I pulled off into a gas station in a place called Dillon, Montana. Leaving the gas station and headed back towards the highway, I saw a sign that read, Apex Road. Apex? By definition, the top or highest form of something. Now there's a sign. Needless to say, we didn't get back on the highway that evening. We hooked a left and headed up Apex Road. Didn't get very far when we realized that Apex Road was also the entrance to a wildlife refuge. Coming to the entrance of that refuge, we had just crossed over a set of railroad tracks and under the highway above us, when I saw a huge graveled area to our left. Looked like some kind of cattle staging area, perhaps. But there it was, our address for the night, in Dillon, Montana. We'd level up, have some dinner, and plop a chair next to the door on the rig for an evening of staring into that big Montana sky. By evening's end, the boys and I had run around all over that graveled area the occasional car would drive out of or back into, that wildlife refuge in the mountains in front of us. There was a ranch house so far off into the distance that as nightfall encroached, it became smaller and smaller and smaller, as if disappearing into the darkness. Once the darkness had fully surrounded us, the sky, it became, well, I'm not even sure I know how to explain it. It became endless. There's no white noise out here. None. Absolutely nothing to distract you from what's above you and all around you. The sky seemingly wraps you up in its arms, the hugest, warmest, longest, tightest, most loving hug you've ever experienced. I sat in that chair just outside the RV door with no sense of time. I had not a single urge to get up, and I knew it was real because neither did Doogie or Billy. The three of us just sat there on August 31st, 2019, and let that big Montana sky hug us. Staring into the depths above us was hypnotic. The darks were unimaginably dark, deep. The stars were so bright, it's almost as if the stars were reaching down through the darkness and touching me on the face, telling me everything was going to be okay. And in fact, everything's pretty awesome. Why would you be anywhere else on the planet at this moment in time? Because finally, after a lifetime of hearing the expression big sky country, we know what that is. It's Montana. A glorious 78-degree sunny day had faded into an even better evening, and as the temperatures dropped, it became time to pack it in for the night. As I closed the door on the RV, I opened up every single window, and the three of us would crawl up into bed, under some covers, and go to sleep in Montana. We woke up to a 39-degree morning, which explained why I was rolled up in a ball under a couple of blankets, 80 pounds of dog, and another 12 pounds of cat, and my head buried under a pillow. After the morning walk with the boys, we'd spend a quiet morning back out under that big sky, with a cup of coffee this time and a laptop, reading about this place called Dillon, but constantly distracted by gazing out over the billions of years of evolution around us. It's always interesting to read how many areas of the country spent millions of years underwater. In this area, geologists refer to it as the Belt Sea, a large body of water that advanced and retracted over a massive area for millions of years. Eventual shifts in the Earth's crust, climate shifts, and volcanic activity would work for another few million years to eliminate those inland seas and transform the area into what we look at today. In this part of the country, the Native American tribes, such as Shoshone, Bannock, and Salish, lived in the area for thousands of years before American settlement. The Lewis and Clark expedition would be their first contact with American settlers in 1805, and it caught my attention to see the Salish tribe listed as an early inhabitant of the area. In episodes 3 and 4, when I learned about the Native American tribes in the Pacific Northwest, the Salish tribe was discussed as a prominent tribe in the area. And further reading here, I'd learned that the tribes in both regions are indeed very connected, in that they're part of the larger Salishan language family, which at one point were a great Salish nation. It was an extensive group of tribes that lived on lands all across the Midwest, spanning all the way to the Pacific coast. Shared heritages and linguistic roots, as well as historical interactions between the tribes, were common across the entire western portion of the country. And after the Lewis and Clark expedition had documented the area, exploration and settlement would begin to increase until 1862, when gold was discovered in an area mapped as Grasshopper Creek. This would kick things into high gear in the area with a flood of activity. As mines began to pop up all over the region, Dillon's location was strategically chosen due to its proximity to these gold mines, which played a crucial role in its early development. The story begins to sound very familiar at this point. This increase in settlements would lead to conflicts with Native Americans. The Great Sioux War would be one of the most notable conflicts in this region and included the Battle of Little Bighorn, which I'd learned about in episode 18, was the result of the U.S. not honoring treaties in the region. Dillon was founded as a railroad town in 1880, originally named Terminus, before being renamed after Sidney Dillon, president of the Pacific Railroad at the time. Early survival of the town relied heavily on the mining activity in the region, and sheep farming, which had been introduced in the region in 1869, would contribute as well. In fact, at one point in time, Dillon was the largest exporter of sheep wool in Montana. Moving into the modern era, the railroad talc mining and a robust cattle industry would all play pivotal roles in Dillon's continued success. Today, the town's population is around 3,800, but growing. The prime industries remain ranching, farming, and some mining, but in recent years, tourism has increased throughout the area, given the town's proximity to the massive mountainous regions nearby, including Beaverhaed-Deerlodge National Forest. This national forest is Montana's largest and spans a mind-boggling 3.3 million acres. And Dillon is considered the gateway to this outdoor adventurous dream. Over 3 million people each year come to experience Beaverhaed-Deerlodge National Forest for themselves. And I'm guessing a lot of them discovered Dillon as well. And what about Red Rock Lakes, this national wildlife refuge just across the road from us, located at the foot of the Centennial Mountains? It covers an impressive 53,000 acres, just over 32,000 of which are designated wilderness. I remember learning about designated wilderness during our stop just outside Fairfield, Idaho. Red Rock Lakes, here in Montana, is known for being the largest wetland complex in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. It also serves as crucial habitat for a variety of wildlife, including grizzly bears, elk, deer, pronghorn, migratory waterfowl, even songbirds. And this refuge is particularly important for the conservation of the endangered trumpeter swan. It's open to the public and visitors are welcome, but only if you're looking to immerse yourself in true wilderness. It sounds like my kind of place, but I kind of chuckled a bit when I read that roads are few within the refuge, and most of them are dirt and gravel. Four-wheel drive and high-clearance vehicles are recommended. Dang, so do I need to get a four-wheel drive RV? There are a couple of primitive campsites within the refuge, but don't come here looking for full hookups. This is all about nature. Oh, and be bear aware. We left Dillon, headed north. We'd pass by Butte, Helena, and eventually, after curving west a bit, Missoula. But before leaving Montana this trip, I needed one last trek off the asphalt, one more night in Montana. And that opportunity would show up about 30 minutes into the Helena National Forest, when I saw a sign that read, Public Access. It pointed to a gravel road heading up into the mountains. Another one of those signs. The Helena National Forest covers nearly 1 million acres of west central Montana. The area showcases Montana at its rugged best. Paved roads are few, and folks around here, they know how to cohabitate with both black bears as well as grizzlies. The area is dominated by the Big Belt Mountains, which is home to the Gates of the Mountains Wilderness Area. This wilderness area protects nearly 30,000 acres and remains nearly as untouched today as it was when Lewis and Clark trekked through here some 200 years ago. Our camp would be creekside in an area called Copper Creek. 15 miles of gravel road winds you up and through the forest. And just a heads up, cell signal drops off about 5 miles in, so you can be sure your time is your own here. It was an awesome afternoon and evening. Poor Billy didn't get out much, and obviously on the harness on the short walks we did take. Even Doogie had to endure the leash. Be bear aware signs posted everywhere? Well, that can shift your mindset. This is not the wide open spaces type of wilderness we had just come through. This is indeed wilderness, but a heavily forested one, not taking any chances here. There would be no lounging around outside into the evening hours. When dark came, we were packed up safely inside, but with the window open, so we could hear that Copper Creek just outside, and sensing Montana all around us. We woke up early the next morning, stepped out of the RV, realizing that not a single car, truck, not another human had been by here since we pulled down in here the previous day. I love this. I love that these places still exist in our world, in our country. Doogie and I went for a quick walk to take care of the morning's business, but for the most part, my little buddies had to hang out inside. After breakfast, I grabbed my razor and walked out onto the rocks along the creek, splashed that icy water on my face, and shaved, right there on the river, but constantly looking up into those mountains around me, wondering what might be watching. In a universe where the propane water heater would kick on and I'd shave in the shower, not here. No hot water in this icy creek. I wanted to imagine what it might have been like on this very creek, who knows, maybe this very spot. Imagining what it might have been like to have been a prospector here a couple 100 years ago, relentlessly chasing dreams of riches and finding gold in that pan of mine. You know, riding in on horseback with my mule in tow, the trusty working dog running about on patrol the evening before, then setting up camp, pitching the canvas tent, tossing in the blankets, furs, pelt, I don't know, whatever I had for warmth at night, throwing it all in atop that makeshift bed I'd just constructed using branches and leaves. Then scouring the area for firewood and lighting that campfire, the one I'll diligently keep burning through each night, to fend off those grizzlies that might take a liking to the smells coming off my cast iron skillet or the coffee pot in the morning. That trusty working dog does his job well, alerting me to any potential danger at a moment's notice. I thought about Doogie for a second. It's likely built into his DNA to be that trusty working dog, but the irony? I likely do not have it in mind to let him. My Colt revolver never leaves my side, and the trusty Hawkins Plains rifle is likely never more than 3 steps away either. Guy's got to be on his toes out here. It is, after all, the Wild West. But a guy's also got to shave. So I shaved, in Copper Creek, in the early morning hours of August 30th, 2019. And it was pretty awesome. And let's not get hung up on the fact that a prospector 200 years ago had likely never heard the word Gillette, and I don't own a straight razor, but close enough. We'd pull out of that spot along Copper Creek mid-morning and trek that 15 miles of dirt road back out to the highway, exhilarated. Made that right-hand turn and entered into another full day of sights, leaving western Montana behind. We'd cross through Idaho, again at Coeur d'Alene, and back into western Washington just outside Spokane. But after last night in Copper Creek, I was not looking forward to the boredom of pulling into a rest stop or RV park for sleep. But as things seem to be going for us these days, a little gravel road would change things, everything, for the night and the following morning. We got off the highway at an exit marked Sprague, Washington. I took the exit because under the name Sprague, it proclaimed RV Park. But at the stop sign, one sign directed us to the left, that RV Park, but what I noticed, of course, was the county road sign marking a graveled road winding south into the horizon. And you've met me, right? Off into the dusty evening glow we went. I guess about 15 or 20 miles later, we'd passed only a couple of farmhouses, 2 graveled intersections. I was still searching for a spot off the road large enough to pull off and turn around. It was full-on dark at this point, around 10 o'clock, I think, when I saw a spot that looked like it could work. So I got out, walked around with a flashlight, and it would work. We'd found our spot for the night. I checked for a cell signal, but there was none. So we crawled under the covers and went to sleep, anxious to see our surroundings by the light of day. And what we awoke to was pretty incredible. Amazing views of hayfields over rolling hills as far as the eye could see. This was a part of Washington State's personality that I'd not met yet. Many of the fields had just been harvested, but the automated irrigation systems still rolling along, the scattered spots of lush green, the occasional John Deere tractor sitting idle in the field, signaled that there was still a bit of work to be done here before packing it in for the winter. And it seemed almost rude to break all this glorious silence and beauty with the sound of a generator firing up. So instead, I pulled out the French press again and brewed up some coffee on the stove. But this time, I crawled up on top of the rig and enjoyed that first cup of coffee, gazing around at nothing but hayfields and sky. Meanwhile, down below, in the dirt, Doogie and Billy couldn't get enough of the tall grassy stuff, ditches, dirt, countless new scents. So while the boys crisscrossed their newly found backyard, Dad watching over 'em from atop the RV, I checked the phone again and had just enough signal to pull up maps and learn that we were in a place called Quincy. Now, if you live in Washington State, then of course you've heard the terms Eastern Washington and Western Washington, depending on what region you live in. For us, Western Washington. And just because you've heard the term Eastern Washington, it doesn't mean you know anything about it. And I certainly knew nothing of Eastern Washington. In my head, Eastern Washington meant Spokane, the second largest city in the state with a population of just under 230,000. Just another big city, right? Wrong. Spokane might be a part of Eastern Washington and where most of the people over here live. But the heart, the essence of Eastern Washington, I think you find that right here, in places like Sprague and Quincy, Washington. I started with the delineation between Eastern and Western Washington, but quickly realized I could get immersed for days in the formation of the Cascade Mountain Range. And don't even get me started on how fascinating the Pacific Ring of Fire is. But that's not what this moment was about. So suffice it to say for now that some 5 to 7 million years ago, volcanic activity in the region, an area would become known as the Pacific Ring of Fire, and it would shove a mountain range up through the Earth's crust, creating a clear delineation between the semi-arid climate of Eastern Washington and the temperate maritime climate of Western Washington. And while well over 7 million folks call Washington home, just shy of 2 million call Eastern Washington home. The rest, well, they're all over there on that western side. But when looking at size, the tables flip. Of the state's total landmass, nearly 47,000 square miles of it belongs to Eastern Washington. The other 25K, again, over there in Western Washington. But climate, geography, population, those aren't the only things that make Eastern Washington different. Sitting here on a 63-degree morning atop the RV, hayfields as far as I can see, I'd learn about the other things that make places like Quincy different. First, the area in general is considered part of the Columbia River Basin, And I guess I'd not even realized that we were so close to the Columbia River, just some 200 miles or so up from where we had spent nearly 2 weeks boondocking on the shores of it in Rufus, Oregon, earlier this year. I would also learn that the town of Quincy, Washington, was founded as a railroad camp during the construction of the Great Northern Railway in 1892. It would be incorporated in 1907 and named after Quincy, Illinois. Now, I've learned all over this part of the country that if a town relies solely on the railway, things could shift in either direction pretty quickly. But in Quincy's case, the arrival of water in the area from the construction of the Grand Coulee Dam in the 1930s would open up the town's future to agriculture. And it's always fun how this happens. Reading and learning about one thing leads to another. And in this case, I'd end up spending a couple of hours learning about the Grand Coulee Dam here in Washington. Now, I'm not sure I was even aware of the dam's existence prior to right now, which is hard to believe given the milestones marked during the construction of it. It was a massive project that began in 1933, with many insisting it was a waste of money and resources. Those skeptics, they believed it was fool's play to attempt to harness the sheer force of the Columbia River, and the costs it would incur would never be recouped. But thanks to the folks that insisted on moving forward with the project, Stage 1 of the dam would be completed 9 years later, ahead of schedule and under budget. But that's not what's impressive about this Grand Coulee Dam. The project was originally conceived in the 1920s as an irrigation project, an attempt to divert waters from the Columbia River north into the area known as the Columbia River Basin, and Quincy is in the heart of that region. Once mining in the basin had begun to die off, many saw the area as just a barren, arid, high desert wasteland, and were it not for the Grand Coulee Dam project, it likely would look much different than it does today, the agriculture powerhouse it is in Washington state. The advancement of technologies leading up to and through the construction of the dam would add power generation to the list of things the dam would accomplish. Upon its completion in 1942, the dam would be the largest power generating source on the planet. But the folks at Grand Coulee Dam, they didn't stop there. Construction would continue. State-of-the-art pumping systems would be deployed, resulting in successful irrigation of over 600,000 acres in the basin, helping it to shift from being known only for the gold mines of the past and providing them a path to the future. In addition, a third powerhouse would be added in 1974, which would add some of the largest generators on the planet to the complex, and help the Grand Coulee project hold on to its status as the largest energy generating plant in the United States right through today. In total, construction on the dam, including future additions and improvements, would last some 50 years and employ over 11,000 people during peak construction. The dam itself consists of a lower and an upper section and is over 500 feet tall, over 1.5 miles long, and Lake Roosevelt, created by the dam, would end up extending some 150 miles and has over 600 miles of shoreline and a surface area of over 82,000 acres. And the power generated at the dam was critical and ended up playing a pivotal role during World War II, ensuring that manufacturing plants had the power necessary to produce the massive amounts of aluminum needed to produce the planes and ships needed to support the war effort. Seriously, the list of what was accomplished during the construction of this dam literally goes on, and I wouldn't be able to do it justice. There's a pretty awesome documentary-style film that was put together by the Bureau of Reclamation. It does a great job of telling the story of Grand Coulee Dam. I'll put a link to the video on YouTube in the show notes if you're interested in learning more about it. I'll quote from that film when I say, "The Grand Coulee Dam remains a testament to American engineering and a symbol of the nation's ability to harness natural resources for the benefit of society. It continues to be a significant source of hydroelectric power and a vital component of the region's irrigation infrastructure." Close quote. That Grand Coulee Dam would go down in history as a man-made marvel. They had built the biggest thing on Earth at its time, using technologies that were literally developed as they were needed. From temporary bridges and mini cofferdams, a series of mini dams that were built to redirect the massive force of the Columbia River around the construction site, And all of this done during the country's Great Depression, employing thousands from across the country that would come to call the Pacific Northwest home. Doing so in towns that were literally built to house them during the project and remain there today. Like I said, I could and did get lost in learning about the tenacity required to pull off a project of this scale nearly a century ago. Check out that video on YouTube. I'm literally scratching the surface here. And all of that happened? And is happening just 77 miles from where I'm sitting on top of an RV this morning reading about it all. Sitting here in the middle of endless hayfields here this morning, it's obvious the role that agriculture plays in Quincy. But I would also read that in recent years, technology has come to play a role in the town's economy. The town's motto, after all, is where agriculture meets technology, another interesting benefit for Quincy. As the result of being so near the power generation at the Grand Coulee Dam, low-cost electricity has drawn multiple data centers to the town. Massive players in the tech industry like Microsoft, Yahoo, Dell, Intuit, have all established data centers in the area, employing hundreds in Quincy alone. The 7,000 or so folks that call Quincy home today, well, they enjoy the diversity of the area as a result of the meshing of these two industries. And as if Quincy needed one more feather in its cap, the Gorge Amphitheater is just 16 miles outside the city limits. The Gorge was initially part of a vineyard opened as a private venue in 1986 with a seating capacity of around 3,000 folks. But the natural acoustics of this little gorge would lead to the concept of holding larger concert events in the venue. MCA would purchase the property in 1993, and seating capacity would steadily climb to its current 19,000. In 2006, the venue would again change hands when acquired by a company called Live Nation, and their merger with Ticketmaster in 2010 would mean the Little Gorge in Washington State was now part of a global entertainment company. In the following years, the Gorge would receive the Best Outdoor Venue Award from Pollster magazine 9 times. Today, some $50 million are generated each year via the Gorge, and that really comes as no surprise when you take a quick look at the myriad of festivals, celebrations, and massive concerts that take place here each year. Big names in most any music genre have likely played here. And reading through all this, I kept finding myself adding stops to our travels, to our adventure. Now I gotta go see Grand Coulee Dam and this place called the Gorge. In fact, I'm kind of surprised I haven't already been there, given it's just 160 miles away from where I lived for 23 years. But this trip had to head back to get that work done. Eventually, I'd climb down off the roof of the RV, pack things up, and hit the road. We took a left on that gravel road, took that last few miles of gravel, nice and slow, soaking it all in. But eventually, we'd pull back out onto Interstate 90, continuing west towards, civilization. Turns out, this thing called life comes with a lot of rules. Maybe it's time to break a few. Because you can. No, seriously, you can.